My name's Adam Goodkoff. I'm an ER physician by training, still practice part-time clinically. And importantly, I suppose, for today's conversation, healthcare influencer, have been doing that almost 10 years now, over 2 million followers across platform. And that led me to co-found and now be the CEO of Medfluencers, which is an HCP influencer marketing agency.
Amazing. So can you tell me a little bit about what happened in that space between being the emergency physician to now founding Medfluencers?
So I think it actually starts earlier. It was when I was in training. So I've always enjoyed education. I actually extended my medical school time with what we call a teaching fellowship. So I stayed and I taught anatomy and ultrasound. And I really found this passion for education. And at that time, I was teaching, lecture halls of 200 medical students. But I started making content online. And it started to reach 200 viewers, then 2,000, then 20,000, right? And it continued on. And I had this moment where I said, well, if I can teach 200 people, that's amazing. My goal is to help people as I'm teaching, right? And if I'm now reaching 20,000 online, I need to take this a little more serious. And I loved creating content that was for learners, for medical learners. So I kind of doubled down on that. I started on Instagram pretty seriously. TikTok came about, very rapid growth there. Timing was great with the pandemic. And this all continued to kind of spiral, if you will, down this pathway. And I'm just kind of every month taking it month by month and saying, oh, it's getting more serious. I need to invest more time in this. And at some point I realized, hey, this is really rewarding being an ER physician, but I'm actually able to do something really amazing here on social. And so in that process, just continued to kind of invest in myself and in content and improving, the quality of the content that we could make and the diversity and focus around what we were making. And that, as I said, kind of led to Medfluencers.
Amazing. So there's a whole lot I want to dive in and unpack around what you guys, from the regulation and how you sort of breached that as a physician, I guess, in the US, and we're seeing that a little bit in Australia. But tell me first, you're here at Health.
Yeah.
How's the experience been?
It's been amazing. So I actually was doing a video yesterday saying just how refreshing the difference is, because we did Health US, and Health US is amazing in its own right, but it's a very different feel than coming here. And so I'm really enjoying it. It's kind of laid back. It's really great to see folks from all around the world having different inputs on medicine, different innovation ideas. The talks have been great on all the various stages. So we've really been enjoying coming out here. And I think it's a nice change.
Yeah, great. I will agree with you on that. I think it's really nice also just to get out of your own backyard.
Exactly.
And see what is happening. And then you can sort of go home and you can also be like, oh, we're actually doing all right.
Yeah, we're doing cool stuff.
We're doing cool stuff. Yeah. There's some great stuff coming from around the place.
Agreed.
All right, well, let's dive into the, I think the important bits. So I want to learn more about how Medfluencers bridges that space around that regulation, compliance, building trust, and I guess, your nemesis, Dr. TikTok?
Yeah, I wouldn't say nemesis. Yeah, we are now. Dr. TikTok. I think we're okay with it. So, multi-part question. I'll start with the regulatory. When I started the company, and the real reason why, we've kind of danced around this, but why did I start the company? Well, I was building this audience, right? But I saw a couple other docs at the same time having really great success. And I was really worried in my career, and in the U.S. at least, physicians are very taken advantage of in the health system. For a host of reasons that we don't have to get into today, but it's not what it used to be really is true. And so I saw this opportunity here to, in a way, protect physicians with what they're doing, get them appropriately compensated, and make sure the content that they're making is safe and compliant. And so to start that out, we sought out the right board of advisors. And one of our lead advisors is the former head of compliance at AbbVie. And so we really dug into what makes compliant content. Can you do this? Because at the time, no one was doing this. Nobody was really, I think there was one example of a physician who'd partnered with pharma to make a content that actually lived on an open platform. Mm-hmm. But that was kind of my mission. As I saw all these patient influencers and general influencers, and not even quotes on patient. They just really were general influencers that were working with pharma. And I said, well, we have really accurate, really well-educated physicians. We need to get them in this mix because the content they make is amazing. They're educational. They're experts on the topic. So we need to find a way to do this. And so through a lot of legwork, right, we started to hammer down what are the key pillars of compliance, right? Obviously, we need accurate content, but then learning a whole mini class in kind of the law of compliance and, what is fair balance? What is ISI? How do we deliver important safety information? How do we maintain in this new format that really the FDA hasn't commented on? How do we do our best to deliver a fair balance? And we partner really closely with a regulatory team actually called OneSource Regulatory. They're phenomenal. And so we've worked with them as well to try to define in a way what we can do to stay ahead of the curve on that, to be as compliant as possible. Of course, the FTCs need to be compliant there, but it's a little bit easier, a little bit more transparent.
Yep.
And so we always kind of go a step above. One of the other things we do at Medfluencers, we built a physician ethics board. And so to make sure that there's no conflict of interest, we have a group of physicians that are not financially involved evaluating every single partnership to make sure that these HCPs that we work with are safe and protected ethically. So there are multiple layers of protection. And then I think the last answer to that question is tech. We have looked very heavily at tech. I would say you learn from your mistakes. Thankfully, we work very hard not to make large mistakes, but we look at every revision that we submit to an MLR team as a mistake, because that was something that wouldn't have gotten passed and had to be revised, right? So if you look at all of those, you can start to learn and understand from your mistakes and start to build out models as to what could be more efficient. So we're constantly learning and evolving. I think that's how regulators always feel. I spoke at DIA last year, and it's everybody in that room, while they are the regulatory experts for their company, are all looking and learning from each other. So it is a constant learning process, much like medicine.
Yeah, it's a very fast-paced evolution.
Yes, absolutely.
Getting stuff out into the social media.
It is a very quick turn. We've had some really cool opportunities around quick turns. Specifically at conferences, actually. We've had some clients that have actually brought their MLR teams to a conference. And we've worked hand in hand with our accounts teams, with their MLR teams, to film content, get it approved same day, and actually get it live, which is like one of the coolest things we've done.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So speaking here, what are you going to be talking about?
So this is interesting for me because it's kind of a step aside from the normal topics that I talk about, but I'm really excited. I'm speaking on a panel really around patient perspective. And so it's interesting for me, both as a physician and as an HCP influencer and someone who's kind of leading these teams, to remember how important it is to bring the patient perspective in. So we've got some really interesting folks from Savvy. There are some folks in the drug development space from the PhD level. And we're bringing those perspectives together to really understand what are the factors that, folks who are designing medications, designing experiences for health as a whole, right? What are the things that we need to take into play there? And so I'm excited to kind of almost be a passenger on the bus there and bring out really great discussion for the audience there on that panel.
Yeah, and I would love to, what is with your audience, and I guess at the end of the day, they are patients, they're users. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in those patient perspectives?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. So my audience is actually largely healthcare, but I do have a fair amount of patient audiences. And again, by way of running Medfluencers, I see a large number of audience segments from other influencers who are much more patient-facing. I think we saw, if you asked me a year ago, the trend was really general health education, especially post-COVID. Everybody wanted to understand their health a little bit better, and so we saw that as the trend maybe last year. This year, I think it's a doubling down specifically around, I see a lot on chronic illnesses, especially as biologics are coming to the market. Yeah. So patients are getting really, really skilled and educated about how these medications work, who should be taking them, why aren't they taking them. There's a lot of conversation in patient communities here. And so I think it's also a great chance for HCPs to jump in that mix and actually, dispel some of the, I had this experience. Like, that's why we have clinical trials, right? That's an N of one, as we say. That's one person's experience. Doesn't devalue it, right? It's still important. But if someone has 1 million followers and they say, don't take this drug because I had this, that can be negatively influential. Yes. So on the other side, we want an allergist coming in and saying, yes, this is a real side effect, right? But it helps a lot of other people. And this is why we talk with our physicians about what is right and wrong and what may be a good option. So I think we're seeing a time of patient empowerment and education, which is amazing. We're also seeing that on the physician side. And we're seeing a lot more HCPs join. We work with over 600 HCP influencers and Medfluencers. If you ask me that number again just last year, it was only about 350. So it's been growing tremendously. Yeah, and that's even through our very strict vetting process.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's so interesting to hear. So for our listeners in Australia and those that are sort of, trying to work out what that looks like for them, wanting to have a bit more of a voice and own their own brand, I guess, as a physician in Australia, what advice would you have for them?
So I acknowledge the bias, but this was a question. Tulane University came to me with the same question. Yep. They said, our doctors want to be online. We want to share their stories, but they don't know how to do it. They write papers, but they don't know how to make short form content. So we actually partnered together. I built a course called Healthcare Social Media Academy. It's an online course. And for those in the US, they can get CME for taking it. But it literally takes a physician or any HCP really from, I know I want to do this, but I have no idea how, to I have a really good understanding of scripting, filming, basics of video, lighting, sound, that type of stuff. And so it takes them end to end on this. I think my one word take home, whether someone takes the course or not, the kind of moniker is you just have to start. Yeah. You have to pick up the phone, the camera, whatever you're going to use, and start. Your first video will always be your worst video, right? the beauty of social media is it's kind of a diary, a journal of progress, right? So you're never really going backwards. You're constantly tweaking and evolving. And I'm sure if you guys go back and look at your first episodes, you say, oh man, that's not what we have today.
Cringe. I go, oh my God, put me back on the emergency floor.
Right. Yeah. So I think there's an element of that with social, and a lot of folks feel pressure. Well, I don't want to make bad content. My colleagues are going to make fun of me. All of that's going to happen. You're going to make bad content. People are going to make fun of you, right? People made fun of me my whole career until there's kind of a tipping point. There's a great, book called The Tipping Point. Yes. It's much the same, right? All of a sudden, people are coming up to you and saying, "Hey, how did you do it? Do you think I could come in a video with you?"
Steps.
Right. And so we made that course to try and demystify that. I think the truth is there's no secrets. It's a lot of hard work, but there is a framework that you can follow to get there. We do it time and time again. And so hopefully that's helpful for the listeners.